Hello and welcome to another Lord of the Rings Rise to War video. I'm the player who plays as the King Under the Mountain, and today's video is going to hurt me quite substantially. It's quite a sad day, but to be fair, I do have to do it. So today's video is sadly going to be on the rise of Gil Galad in 2.0, well, 2.2, whatever people calling it now, I guess. This is post-update, where his evasion can no longer be stolen by Sauron. It has made him slightly more meta. It pains me to say this about an elf. I will promise I'll stop moaning about him shortly, but does it mean I'm going to use him still? Probably not, but I did feel it was the right thing to at least vaguely give him an honourable mention in his rise. So we'll go get straight into it because he's an elf. Mine is respect 7. If I could have done a long time ago, I'd have probably took him to respect 4, 5 maybe, which probably would have been an error. I may increase him back to 10. We'll see. Very doubtful, but we'll see. I may have to get pulled back in. I'm going to talk through some positives about him, I swear, during this video, even though, like I say, it pains me a lot. So, skill-wise, at R4, and even for a low spender and a free-to-play, this is one of the things I do think about Gil Galad, to be fair, and why he's useful. As a low spender, you can pretty much, at some stage in your life, get Gil Galad to R4. His kit does work at R4. I'm going to explain through what it is. For me, I would probably change it at R5 to a different build, and I'm going to talk through that as well for the different reasons. Again, I'm going to go into in this video the interaction between him and some other commanders, potentially some gear sets as well that suit him. And at the end, I'm going to talk about a full elf formation that I'd kind of rack my brains to. It might work, it might not, but it's more viable in now than it ever has been. So, again, painful to say. Never beat dwarves, but there you go. So, the main skill we're going to be talking about here is Kingly Kin. And the reason why Gil has become slightly more meta, if not the meta, because we're now saying the new meta is, I still think this needs to be tested for a long period of time, by the way, but the new meta for now is Dane, Gil Galad, Gandalf the White, and Sauron. So you've only got the one damage dealer in there in Dane. The theory is this evasion from 3 units of elves really helps you get through those early rounds, allows Dane to get into his work, provided he doesn't get stunned. Would probably be my main point on that, really. And because this now can't get stolen, because Sauron's Deceiver skill no longer goes off pre-battle for the madness, this is now very powerful as a mechanic. I mean, it was anyway on the fights that it didn't happen. So, to talk through it, for the first 2 rounds, alpha units in 3 allied formations have a 60% chance to evade damage. Plus 15 defense at level 5. Level 10, this is why you get into level 10, is because you then get a 70% chance. Now, I'm pretty sure some people think this makes him invincible, which obviously it doesn't. Or not him, sorry, the units it protects, which is likely to be the other 3 commanders, if I'm honest. You're likely to use something like a Swan Knight or a Cataphract or a Troll on Gil Galad. So he pulls the hits, and I'll explain why on that later when I come to the formation a little bit. So this evasion mechanic is genuinely really powerful, but 3 hits in 10 still get through. White Council will still get hit in the first couple of rounds. It'll be minimal, but it will still get hit. If I'm going to talk through it again, Gil formations were being hit without Sauron in comps pre this update, and they were still losing, but I can see the viability of this, which is why I'm kind of bringing myself to talk about it. I would have 5 points in Icicle purely for the stun, to be honest. The likelihood is that you are going to get this stun, and it's a guaranteed stun. You've got, probably a 2 in 4 chance of other people that it's going to matter when it hits. You're going to be faster than, you'll definitely be faster than a Dane. Debatable if you'll be faster than a Bjorn, but you'll definitely be faster than a Dane. You kind of want to keep your Gil Galad slow, so with a lot of people switching to Gimli, it won't matter so much again, because he's going to go through the evasion, but this stun would still quite heavily affect Gimli, because in that round 3 for the dwarves, which is where this will go off, if you hit one of those dwarves, you are affecting their main damage skill, which, of course, if I just show you, so as it goes off in round 3, Durin's Blood, So if you're faster than Dane and Gimli, which you will be, to be honest, you're going to get that stun, which is also pretty cool. And if you can stun that, it's not necessarily game-changing, but it's good for you. So that's kind of the first point about that I'll make, why this sort of is the choice. The next R4, I get why you do this. So for the first 5 rounds, you're then getting this increased attack, which is attack and defense, sorry, which is obviously modified by command. You are going to build your Gil quite tanky with the command. So, theoretically, this is really good. And it works for a longer period of time. You're going to get more reduction if, say, they're running a Bjorn. You're going to get more reduction into that round. So that's also good. This is kind of irrelevant, really. And to be honest, you're not likely to run 4 formations of elves just because of the mechanic only working on 3 here. So 9 points of this is plenty. For me, if I'm honest, if I was R5, and people will probably argue against this sort of flat defense mechanic here, which is useful, don't get me wrong, I would probably most likely at R5 switch to this, potentially. And get my damage output from from Gil. See, there's the dwarf in me again. My damage output from Gil up a little bit, even though I am going to build in defensively, you can still output some damage. And then the next instance of damage taken by the commander is minus 5%. Pretty sure it used to be minus 10, so it's interesting it's now minus 5, but I would probably argue that starts going slightly different. You can go one way or the other, really. Obviously, this affects the entire fight. This is based on the first 5 rounds, so a lot of fights are decided in the first 5 rounds. I'm just saying different ways around you could do it. I wouldn't, to be honest, be maxing this at any stage. So my next points are either going to fill this up and start going into here. Ironically, at R10, obviously, you'll fill 3 trees. Wow, that's hard for me to say. But the likelihood is, if I'm being honest, you would probably go 9, 5, and 6 would probably be my guess at respect 10. I would love to show you, but mine isn't respect 10 for obvious reasons because I'm a dwarf lover. As for the relic itself, I wouldn't really heavily invest in the relic. I think one of the great things about it now is it's only 10 mithril for a relic. There are some weird stuff that you have to do for him, like this Fallen and keeping Grey Haven, so you pretty much have to start at Linden at some stage. And this like recruit Elrond thing, a bit weird. Again, base stats are great. It adds to the commander's kit. I'm not entirely sure this is good, but the extra command on him would be good. Extra unit defense is good. A little bit of unit attack is also good. So 3 out of the 4 of your strengthening is pretty good. Would I refine it? Probably not. I haven't seen fantastic results. If someone wants to try and show me a full refined Gil Galad that's healing and doing really well, please let me know. But for me, I probably wouldn't be refined. I think there's better opportunities to spend your mithril on. So from there, I'm just going to talk through the kind of equipments that you're probably likely to see on Gil Galad, and for that, I'll probably have to go to the chest, if I'm honest, because my gear isn't necessarily prepared for a Gil Galad, as everyone can probably appreciate. So if I just go to the chest, and I'll try and flick through. So you can't use a Reckoning with Gil, which is another downside, because it is the best defensive unit. So you're going to try and build your Gil with a lot of command and a lot of unit defense. You could go the other way, and I'm going to talk about that later on in a potential L formation, actually. Not necessarily in this one, but I'm talking in the purely meta formation, how you're likely to build Gil at the moment. So when you're pitching him with a Gandalf the White, Bjorn and Dane, for example, which is still a great formation, it allows you to do a few bits and bobs, but I will go into that shortly. And if you're building it in the way of you going Dane, Gandalf the White, Sauron, and Gil, again, you're going to go max defense, really. So you can't use a Reckoning. So you're kind of looking down the route of something like a Lang, really and truthfully, which I use. It's got good command, it's got good unit defense, a little bit of unit attack, but you're not really after that at this stage. So you'd be looking at something like the Lang. Again, for your chest, you're going to be looking at the High Elf Horberk or something with unit defense if you haven't got that. For your accessory, I don't know why it puts the accessories above there, to be honest. Again, you're going to be looking into your elves for this. Great command and great unit defense. And then as your helmet, you're likely to probably look at something like the Cask of Submerged Isle, which again gives great command and great unit defense. That's going to be a seriously tanky Gil. As for the actual set effects, which I don't know, can I get from here? And this is just a little bit of a Gil trick. In a way, if you can, and this is only if you can, you want to be building in with some evasive action. And the reason I'm going to say this is because if you run him slow enough, which you inevitably will do, to be honest, and other people are going off first, this, if he's slow enough, will last 3 rounds and actually finish off in round 4. So the slower you can run him, the better, really, and you'll kind of keep this buff throughout the entirety of that round and a bit more. So really good. In this formation, like I'm saying, I'll try and do the interaction of how it works because it's not necessarily difficult, but I'll try and explain it. So let's go for the meta formation start with, say. So you're going to be looking at your Dane if you're using Dane, Gandalf the White, Sauron, and Gil. You're looking at your Dane to be your main damage dealer. Everyone else is going to chip in. Your Gandalf the White, because you're going to have some quite good Zenith levels, is going to chip in. Mainly because he's going to be built in a high focus build. So instead of these, you're likely to see his Fine Smoking Pipe and something like an Obsidian Dagger, I would hazard a guess. So you're getting some damage out of Gandalf the White, probably from these skills here, because you're likely to be of Zenith level. So you're going to have one of these probably maxed. Probably likely the White, if I'm honest. So he's going to get a little bit of damage out. You don't need as much unit defense then on your Gandalf because Gil Galad is pulling through the evasion for the early rounds. So that is kind of the theory behind how Gil helps the rest of the formation boost their damage. Whereas Sauron in this scenario, he is debuffing, so he is allowing Dane to go away and do what he does best, which is basically just cause havoc, which is why dwarves are better than elves. That's probably the easiest way of explaining how that build works and why you are then tanking with Gil, because you need to take the hits. Because you've only got one damage dealer, everything else has to just tank, pretty much. Like I say, your Gandalf will do some damage. In that scenario, your Gil's probably likely to do some damage as well, because he's likely to probably have this tree also quite high up. So your units in general are going to do some damage. I've seen some great reports with Swan Knights, even with defensive gear, to be honest, where the Swans have still made Gil put out 78k damage, which is pretty impressive, to be fair. My next point on this is, say if you're running, and this is, I think, what people will... You'll see a lot more of this on the battlefield, and I'm going to talk through my problem with how I find this formation on the battlefield and how it's now apparently world beating. Can't wait to be proven wrong when I keep getting slapped by Gil, honestly, I can't. But until then, I just wanted to put it out there. So the likelihood is you're going to see in NRP, for example, and I need to make that assumption, actually, roleplay, no one is not going to use Gil in roleplay. So if you are a roleplay player, unlock your Gil, fire him up, make the elves, you're just going to get used. Gil is just going to get used. He's going to put in great work. That's just a fact. This is looking at it from an NRP kind of angle, which is probably what I should say. Your role play instant formula is still going to be Dane, Gandalf the White, Gil Galad, and either Bjorn or Gimli, but likely to be Bjorn if I'm being honest. We'll go back to NRP. I probably should have mentioned that. You're likely to still see, I think, for a period of time because of the changes, Sauron, Gil, Dane, and arguably either Gimli or Bjorn. I will be sticking with Bjorn, but you're still going to see that second damage dealer. You're going to see some shadows as well, I think, and you're likely to see some Saruman's. And I'm going to kind of, again, go through that interaction. It's very similar to the interaction before. You're likely to see a Gandalf with high focus, whose White Council's fantastic. He's quicker than someone else's Sauron. And the Gil Galad evasion mechanic allows that White Council to last into something like round 4, 4.5, maybe even 5 if you get lucky. And basically you avoid things like this gargantuan damage bomb from Bjorn, because you've still got potentially White Council doing 60%, 70% taking off this. It's a big chunk of his damage in that sort of in that skill that's going to be cut down quite significantly. You see Bjorn doing a lot less damage. Again with Gimli, yes, he can cut through the evasion. Fantastic if you've got the unique. Where is it here? So it gains Keen Eye with more than 50 focus. I don't know anyone's Gimli these days who doesn't have more than 50 focus, if I'm being brutally honest. It only takes one item. It's really not hard. So yeah, with the relic, Gimli is a bit of a problem for Gil Galad formations, and he does cut through it earlier on. King of Men is also one of those people who can also kind of hurt early doors through Keen Eye, but again, because of the way he allows White Council to survive, this kind of Durin's Blood Bomb. So let's talk through the two scenarios. You run Gimli and Dane. Both of you try and drop this bomb on round 3. If you haven't been stunned by the Gil, this is going to have the reduction from White Council still pretty much guaranteed if Gil Galad is in the opposing formation with Gandalf the White. And the same if it's Bjorn. Like I say, the likelihood is that it's still going to be lasting to round 4. And because Bjorn's pretty quick, it's likely to be that this is also damage reduced. Now, there are ways around that. And this is where I think it's a great formation. I've got to kind of be careful here because it's an elf and I don't want to be seen to be biased. So it's a great formation. I get it. I get the principle of how it works. I get how it's now more effective because you can't be hit by Deceiver by Sauron. But I saw plenty of reports before the 25th of September in Gil formations which were running this meta, not the new meta, but the old meta of something like a Gil, Gandalf the White, Bjorn and Dane formation. And they were still losing to people who had Sauron. So I am intrigued to see how this suits, because it is a race restrictive skill. Gil has got, you need 3 units of elves really to actually make it work with this evasion. So it is race restrictive. They have got lower defense. They have got lower HP. I get the fact that Bone Knights and this medium meta is going to be good, and I completely accept that. And Bone Knights with something like 160 defense are pretty tanky, to be fair. But I don't know. I feel like it was 2.0 when it first came out, and to this point, Gil formations were still using. There's a reason why he wasn't used in NRP, and I get he's become stronger. But you were still losing in them fights sometimes where Sauron wasn't hitting Gil with the Deceiver and stealing the Kingly Kin. I mean, on the fights when he did, it was like stealing a White Council. It was basically just game over. So I just think it's interesting. I'll be looking forward to seeing more and more reports, I think, as it goes on, to see how that works out. Again, I get this premise of him cutting people. Like, say if you're trying to counter a Gil, and this isn't necessarily how you could easily counter a Gil, but it is something. So if you're running even a Shadow and a Saruman, for example, and just hear me out, I know this takes away half a Shadow's kit, right? But realistically, the amount of early attacks that he's throwing in, it is only 70% evasion. You are going to get some RNG, and you are going to hit through this White Council stacks using someone like him, particularly with a point in Numenorian, which a Black Numenorian I've seen used a lot more now, by the way, with the Focus, which is a different guide that I'll probably do on it. And with Saruman's new skill as well. So if you compared, say, putting a Shadow and a Saruman together, for example, the amount of actual hits you're throwing out in them first 2 or 3 rounds, you're still going to clear some White Council stacks, and you're still going to get through the elves occasionally, because it is only 70% evasion. It's not perfect. Or if you throw a Gimli in there, like I say, with his Keen Eye, you are hitting through the evasion anyway. And Gimli, to be fair to him, has got quite a lot of skills that hit in sort of round 1, 2, and 3. So you'll still clear a lot of the stacks of White Council. But I do get the principle behind it. Now, my concern with this kind of build, again, is I build my Gandalf quite a sort of basic kind of round 200 focus and a decent amount of command. And you could say it's kind of middling because I'm not really going too high on one, not going too high on the other. I personally would just like my Gandalf to be able to tank. It's just the build I use. I don't use Gil. So my Gandalf is tanking for 10 rounds in effect, while also throwing out on half decent White Council, which by me not using Gil, my White Council is infinitely going to disappear first, which is kind of the premise and the pros and cons. But I do think that tanking nature, in comparison to a purely focused Gandalf the White, arguably can put in good work still, because after that White Council has gone, the other person's Gandalf is pretty much made of paper. So it's interesting. I think there's not a guarantee. I don't think there's something that is perfect with it. I think we'll find a lot more about it as we go on. And then I kind of also just wanted to touch on, because I was sort of looking at this afternoon, and it's probably something that you wouldn't do, but I sort of worked on a full elf formation, which could work now that Legolas has been changed. I'm not saying it will, but I'd be interested to see it tested. So it would be Gil Galad, Elrond, in a very different role to what he's currently fulfilling. Thranduil, and I do kind of like Thranduil, if I'm being honest. And then your other guy, particularly now that he's got 3 damage skill trees, would be Legolas, and he's going to be your main damage dealer in this formation. So just hear me out. I can't imagine this for a second is going to be any meta formation. I'm just going to go into the interaction of how they work together. So you've got your main damage dealer in Lego, who at R10, let's say for example, you're going to have these 3 skill trees full. Right? Now, this is a decent damage skill. Also goes off early. And then damage received by allied formation led by the commander with the highest attack minus 10%. Now, this is pretty good because it's likely to sort of hit that pretty well, and I think that minus 10% is pretty cool. You've then got Greenleaf, which is again a decent damage skill, also potentially can deal some poison damage. And then the target's next instance of damage is minus 20%. Now that's pretty big, to be honest. If you can make your Lego faster than other people's damage dealers, and it's going off in rounds 2 and 4, you make him quicker than a Bjorn when he's shapeshifting, for example. That's a pretty powerful skill. And then you've got the Fair, which is, again, third round damage, 550% to 1 formation. Now, it's no Joran's Blood, granted, but pretty good, to be honest. So, again, you see, in this... so he would actually work a lot faster than Bjorn, I would think, because you're getting the initiative in the next round. So, this goes off in round 3. You probably aren't likely to hit as much melee as you used to, but there's still a chance if, in real war, you're likely to have to switch to sort of infantry, I would suspect, rather than cav again. So, again, I suppose large units, a lot of them are melee as well, so this could be quite powerful. But with this, so this goes off rounds 2 and 4, right? So the Fair goes off round 3, and then he gets initiative for the next round anyway, so he's bound to be quicker than Bjorn. So if he hits a Bjorn here for round 4, that's a big change to Shapeshifter, to be fair. And like I say, 3 really, really good damage skills. So in this formation of the 4 elves, he's going to be your main damage dealer. You will run in with elves because you're going to run Legolas, and you're going to run... This is where it gets a little bit rogue with the theory. So you're going to run Legolas, you're going to run Thranduil, and you're going to run Gil with elves. And you're going to use Gil differently, and you're going to tank with Elrond, which I know, again, is a little bit crazy, but hear me out. He's got some nice follow-up for 2 formations, right? You then get to this by the fact that his follow-up is then going to take this down, so that the target's defense can come down quite substantially. He's also reducing their attacks. Again, you're getting a lot of that, and potentially a bit of focus, so you're definitely getting some attack reduced here. In Lord of Imlandris, you've then got this, which is the Commander's Formation and 1 allied formation unit, ignore 6% of the enemy's defense. So you're knocking down their attack, you're knocking down their defense, and then you're taking down the defense further. At level 5, this is modified by command. So what I'm saying is you build Elrond as your tank. Lots of command, lots of unit defense, which is what you'd normally play your Gil as, right? Then I quite like this guy. I know some people don't like it, but in this particular build, which I'm only theorising, I'm not saying it's perfect, right? So half elven, attack of man or elf, so you use your Swan Knights in this formation. in the commander's formation plus 15 and the defense plus 15, which is really important because you're using him as a tank. Effect modified by command stat, right? So you're modifying that defense. So your swans are going to be really tanky. You're going to have lots of unit defense on his build. You're going to have high command, right? Something similar to this, but without that helmet, I would suspect. So again, you want him to be a little bit quicker because you want to make sure he's hitting before some of the others because you want that defense drop on people like Legolas, for example, who, last I looked, initiative is pretty high. So you do need to make sure that, your Elrond is hitting above him. It is important for this build, may I add, that may not work. I'm just talking it through. So he's your tank, right? Then you've got Thranduil, who is literally affecting defensive elves in 3 allied formations, plus 15, effect modified by command stat. Right? So again, you're making your elves more tanky. They're a little bit more immune to focus, burn, and poison, which could be useful in the new meta versus a Saruman. It's only 5%, 5% helps. And if they hit you, it's even better, because you're then looking at this whole plus 18. So it's a little bit more, but, it's not drastic. Then you've got this skill here that I actually think is really interesting. So it hits for a little bit of damage, which you're probably going to have to build in with some damage and some command, I would say. And then it's -5 defense for 10 rounds. Now it can stack, so this skill here is pretty powerful, to be honest. Each round stacking minus defense. So again, you're taking down the defense, boosting your own attacks, boosting your own defense, just saying. It's also taking down the attack of these targets as well at level 10. Now, I'd be ignoring Grey Elf because I don't really see the point in the small bit of evasion, but I'm just saying in this formation, that could work really well. Then you've got to your Gil. So you're literally looking at evasion for the first 3 rounds, pretty much, because he's slow, or 2 rounds at least, and then a little bit of it. So, that's where it is. Again, you've got a lot more defense. Again, you've got modified defense. So I'd be really interested to see how the defense actually come out on this build on your elves, let alone on your Swan Knights. And then you've also got stun from Gil. But to be truthful, you can either do this whereby you're building more defense, or you can build Gil for more attack. So I think it's a little bit versatile, but that's kind of the only 4 elf combo that I could see that sounded pretty cool. And to be honest, the defense buffs would be a bit ridiculous. I mean, I reckon you'd have a lot of formations where your bow knights, if you're using them, have probably got like 185 defense, maybe more, I would guess. And that was Gil, Elrond, Thranduil, and Lego. I do think, by the way, Lego has come on leaps and bounds since he's had a 3rd damage skill. But we were here to talk about Gil Galad. So, for me, at this stage, I can see why people use Gil. The jury is still out for me on Gil. I've been seeing great reports for him. The evasion's fantastic. Are there ways of countering the evasion? Yes. Can you counter it correctly so that you actually take it out early, like a White Council, which you can definitely counter and sort of take it out early? No, is the answer to that. He's definitely improved from where he was pre-September the 25th. I'm just hazarded a guess to say, unless he's in the Zenith levels, and if people are in the Zenith levels, they're always going to perform well. I'm not entirely yet convinced that he beats the other formation consistently over 2 or 3 seasons, for example, or when you throw Saruman in. Obviously, he is part of that meta formation, which is Dane, Gandalf the White, Gil, and Sauron. But to be fair, that formation is being beaten by the Troll formation, which is purely evil. So there is a counter to them, which I explained in my Gandalf the White video earlier on, and I'm not going to go into it again, because I feel like I've already made this one too long. But that was my take on Gil, and as well on a couple of other elves. Like I say, I know Elrond's been changed. Arguably, he's probably one of the people who should actually have a respect refund down to R4, maybe a little bit lower, because his skills genuinely were changed. But I think he could still be built in a different way and be very useful. That 4 elf combo has got a lot of reduction, a lot of increased attack, and a lot of sort of stuff going on that synergizes quite well. I'd love to see how it goes. When I'm in season, I might try it out. My other point on Gil, with the changes that they've made very recently now to season starts, whereby at level 1 you're only getting 1 weapon, and then I think it's 5, 10, and 20 you get the rest of them. Then at 30 you get the relic. That is going to change the way that you farm. I've always been a dwarf starter, but if I'm being honest, it's likely now that the elf start will probably be the strongest. Because of the mechanics included in something like a Gil Galad. If you're only allowed to use a weapon, obviously your one troop farming is going to be very different because you can't just whale up your gear and sort of hit early. So it will change the dynamic. His evasion then will become really powerful, I think, for farming and getting ahead early on. It pains me to say. But that interaction with some of the other elves may also work quite well, to be honest, for farming earlier on if you're using elves. Definitely worth noting is the PvE with Gil. It's always been good anyway, but now that they've sort of changed this mechanic whereby you're only getting a weapon at level 1, chest at 5, helmet at 10, and an accessory at 20, arguably that evasion mechanic and other things are probably more powerful, particularly on dying for PvE earlier on as well. And your white council becomes very important as well, but it always was. So, on that note, that's everything I've got time for on an elf. I apologise for this elf video. Please don't please don't subscribe on the back of it. It'll only upset me. And if in doubt, always follow your nose.